Hi. I debated for a little bit whether or not I wanted to talk about this, but honestly, the more times I told this story, the more I realized I could not make this up if I wanted to. I could not write a more bizarre story if I tried. And I apologize for deriving my title from another Sriracha video, but there is nothing truly more accurate that I could say other than I worked at a clown factory. And I'm going to tell you about that story now. Oh my god, there's a bug. Anyway, plushie of the video, this is my love frog Webkinz named Lucy, short for Lucinda, just in case you're wondering. Back in January, I was looking for a job. You know, the work market is hard in London. I'm sure it is everywhere. And so I was applying to just like anything. You know, I've only really worked retail before, so I was applying to a lot of retail jobs, but I was like, I don't love working like customer facing jobs. So I would prefer to work like, packing boxes, just like something mundane, but I don't have to deal with the public because the public is very mean. And my most recent job that I worked in a K-beauty store, so selling Korean cosmetics. It was essentially just like a drugstore, but we sold Korean products, whatever. I'm also going to say this because this is really important to the story, is that I'm half Korean. My name is Hannah Kim. My last name is Kim. That is the most common last name in Korea. I know I don't necessarily look half Korean, but I am. So obviously my CV says my name, Hannah Kim, right? So I'm applying to all these places, and then I see a listing to work in a warehouse shipping products for a Korean cosmetic, they're essentially drop shippers, right? So I was like, you know what? It's part-time and I can read Korean, so that could be helpful for label purposes. So I apply, right? I don't really hear anything back for a month or 3 weeks, and by that point I had already gotten another job. But they call me and they're like, hey, do you remember applying to this job? And I was like, yeah. And they were telling me a little bit about the job. They were like, so these are the hours, this is the responsibilities that you would have, and there's also room for potential career growth because we're still kind of a relatively small company. So we in the future would be potentially looking for people to run social media / contribute to the website, etc. And at one point throughout the call, he asked are you Korean? And I said yeah. And because by the time they contacted me, I already had a job, and I also had school at the time, I was like, I'm currently studying, but can I contact you again when I'm finished school? And they were like, yes. And I was like, okay, great, cool, awesome, amazing, swag. So fast forward a bit, and I have now finished school. This is May time, so I'd finished all my assessments. I was just waiting for my results, basically. So I had also left that job that I had gotten back in February or whatever for separate reasons, but by that point I had left my job. So I was like, this is great, I can just recontact them. Hopefully the position is still open, whatever. And so I contacted them again saying, hey, I'm done school now, so if you still need someone to work in the warehouse, I can do that. Is there still potentially room to join a social media management or something like that? And I mean, even though I have been doing social media, I don't want to I have been essentially shit posting on the internet since I was 15. And also when I was in school, we were learning how to market ourselves because I went to music school, so you have to market yourself as a musician, whatever. So I had vague knowledge of how to do social media. I didn't necessarily tell them that I'd been doing this for a long time. So they were to their knowledge, they were just kind of taking a chance on some random girl. And keep in mind, this is on the phone while I'm saying is there still room for this and that and the other? And they were like, yes. And then he was like, so you're Korean, right? And then so more talking, I'm asking more details, and then he's like, so you're definitely Korean? And I was like, I am. Yes, I am. You already asked that. I didn't say that, but I was thinking, I was like, okay, maybe he just forgot, whatever. So he's like, okay, we want to set up maybe a meeting just to kind of meet you in person and see if you would be a good fit for whatever. And I was like, okay, great, cool, awesome. This company is owned and pretty much only run by two people. It's a man and a woman. I'm gonna not say their real names. I'm gonna call the woman Rachel and the man Marcus. Okay, whatever. So maybe a week or two later, I go to the warehouse where I would potentially be working if I was to be packing the packages, right? And I meet Marcus and Rachel, and neither of them are Korean, which is not inherently a bad thing. You know, the first K-beauty store that I worked in, the owners were not Korean. That was kind of an issue for a separate reason because they were telling us to lie and say that they were Korean owned, but I don't like lying, so I never did that. That's beside the point. So their whole like shtick is like they're selling like professional grade cosmetics to estheticians. The products are not available to like the general population. You have to like have an esthetician license or like some qualification of some sort to buy the products. So essentially their company outsources the products from like Korean companies, brings it to the UK because I live in London, and then ships it to these estheticians around the country. Okay, throughout this meeting, like they like asked me again like twice, like, you're Korean? And I was like, well, yeah, my name's Hannah Kim, and like, I don't know, whatever. Some people don't think I look Korean, but I think it's pretty obvious I'm like not white. During that in-person meeting, I was kind of asking about like the whole social media thing, and they were like, yeah, well, like we really want a Korean face to be like the face of our company to do like the promotions. And I was like, okay, I have that, so I can do that. That's no problem for me. And they specified that twice, and I was like, okay, not inherently a wrong thing to say, I suppose. So that meeting was left off with them essentially being like, we can't hire you right now, but like maybe at the end of the summer we can hire you. And I was like, that's great because I have traveling to do in the summertime. So that's when I was going to Korea and whatever. So it is now the end of August. And you know what? I have been told that this is kind of the like general experience when it comes to like really small or like startup or like very newly established companies, but everything just felt really unorganized, and I was like, I don't actually know what you want me to do. So I asked to have one more meeting with them before I signed any sort of contract or anything. At this point, it was established that I'm not going to work in the warehouse. I'm just going to do social media stuff, you know, like doing TikTok lives and like making posts for their Instagram and their other social media, etc. So I go to their office space and we're meeting, we're talking. Again, they specify that they want a Korean face. And I was like, yes, you did say that. And then they start saying things like, you know, like we want to decorate this office like really Korean style. In my head, I'm thinking that is really vague, but sure, that I can understand why you would like want that. Also, I'm gonna say right now, if you're like thinking that there's no problems with what they're saying, it gets worse. So, because I'm also thinking this isn't inherently bad, but I don't feel necessarily super duper amazingly awesome about it, but I can't place my finger on why. So I signed my contract and I'm due to start working on September 1st. And over the course of, spoiler alert, only 2.5 weeks at that company, I had experienced a lot of different things to do with like working that was not super awesome, such as they are a couple, Marcus and Rachel are a couple, and they would be having domestic disputes in front of me because the office was just the three of us. And I was like, I feel so uncomfortable. I don't want to be here. But I would just kind of have to ignore it. And also, side note, Marcus is like a huge jerkwad, like so manipulative. I don't know, if I had a partner that spoke to me the way that he was speaking to Rachel, then I would like leave. I would break up with him. Like, especially there was this one time where I was looking at like the shared like company calendar, and I was asking Rachel like, when would you like your meetings to be scheduled for? And she was like, any day is fine, just not on my birthday. And then Marcus was like, oh, it's your birthday? And she was like, yeah, next week. And he was like, it is? This is the first time I'm hearing about this. And I was like, dude, it's on the calendar. And he's like, oh, I'm kidding. And then Rachel was like, oh my god, you're so funny. And it's like, what is the joke? That you have an unattentive partner who doesn't care about you and doesn't know basic facts about you, like when your birthday is? And also, I forgot another thing, is like before like I signed a contract, Marcus was really pushing for me to like sign on as like self-employed, and he was like making it out to be like it would be like this really huge benefit for me. And then I was like, oh, okay, like, well, do I like get to choose like, or do I have more flexibility when it comes to like my hours, or like is there like a potential for like hybrid working? He was like, no. And then I was like, well, then what's like the benefit of like me being self-employed versus like being under your employee? And then he was like, well, you don't have any of your salary taken away by taxes. And in my head, I'm like, well, I still have to, but then like I would have to do my own taxes, right? There is no benefit for me to be listed as like a self-employed employee if I don't get any of the benefits of being self-employed. The only reason why it would be better for them is because they don't have to give me any sort of like employee protection, like sick pay or holiday leave or anything like that. And he was like, no, it's like so simple, it's so much better for you. Like, I'm just doing it because like it's better for you, and like I just want to create a good environment in this working office because like we're all like friends here, whatever. And I'm like, well, if you were really my friend, then you wouldn't be like trying to be weird like that. And also, another thing, I initially, this sounds like I'm complaining. I promise, like, I'm not this much of a complaining McComplainerson, but I'm choosing to complain about these things because of what I'm about to tell you in like 2 seconds. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, I initially applied for like a part-time job, right? Because that's what I want to do. That's like what works into my schedule right now. And then during that meeting, like in August, before I had signed a contract, they were like, oh, so we actually want you to work 8 hours a day. And then I was like, okay, well, is it okay if like I see how it goes for like a month or something? Just because, you know, I was under the impression that I'd be doing like 20 hours a week, you know, whatever. And they were really pushing for me to do 8 hours. And it's like, you know what? There's nothing wrong with doing 8 hours a day of work if that's what you know that you're getting into. But it felt like they ambushed me, like on the spot, were trying to make me do that, like putting me under pressure, like bringing that up and like really pushing for me to do that. So yes, I'm working for 2.5 weeks. Throughout that time, guess how many times I did anything to do with social media? If your guess was 0, you would be correct, because all I did was polish up their website stuff. I have never done anything to do with website design in my life. They were asking me to like help with like designing like pamphlets and whatever, which like is fine. I like vaguely know my way around Canva, so that's fine. A side thing also, like what the fuck did I call his name? Marcus kept being like, oh, just use ChatGPT for that. Oh, we can just use AI for that. And it's like, well, you can, but like it's not great for the environment, and people don't like AI, especially when it feels like they're like trying to be sold something. So I said, I was being very gentle about it. I was like, I don't know how old you guys are, and I'm not going to ask or speculate, but I can speak for my generation, aka Gen Z. We don't like AI when it comes to most things, especially when, you know, we feel like we're being marketed to or trying to be sold a product, or like if we're trying to be deceived in any way. My whole graphic design phase lasted about 3 days, and then for the remainder of my time, what they would do is have me call people who applied to get their products sent to their clinics, because like I said before, the only way that people could buy products from them is if they applied onto their website, and then like they, aka me, would like look over their certification, and if their certification was qualified, then they would be accepted, and then they could buy from the website. And then it was my job to call the people that had just been accepted and say like, you've been accepted, would you like to book a complimentary call with one of our expert estheticians so you can learn more about the products and protocols so you can have a better understanding of what will be best for you and your clientele? That would be what I would say. And I was doing that every day for like 2 weeks, which would be fine if I signed up to be a call center person, but I didn't. And if I would have known that's what it would have had me do, then I wouldn't have like sign up for the job, because if there's one thing that I hate, it's talking on the phone, especially to strangers. It's another day now, and I came back in here because I wanted to add something. One of the other things that made it really difficult for me to like know what I was supposed to do working there is every single day they would change the rules, or they would like add a rule in that would like make what I was doing the day before like now wrong. Specifically, one day before I got to work, Marcus sent me a text saying, we really want to push people booking these like introductory calls with Rachel. So when you call these people, these customers, make sure that you tell them it's mandatory. He used the word mandatory. Make sure you make it seem like it's mandatory for them to book these calls in order for them to be able to buy our products. I'm now in work, I'm calling these people and I'm saying, so now you need to book a mandatory call with Rachel to XYZ. And then after a few calls, Rachel's like, why are you saying mandatory? And I said, oh, well, Marcus told me to say it was mandatory. And then she was like, no, I don't think we want to do that, like whatever. So, and then she called Marcus on the phone, and then Marcus was saying, no, I never said mandatory. We don't want it to be mandatory. We don't want these people to feel like we're forcing them. And I was like, you were literally the one who said to say it was mandatory. Honestly, it kind of felt like I was dealing with divorced parents in the sense where like they were not like communicating what they wanted me to do, so they were like kind of going through me. And you know what, my parents in real life do that, so that's kind of funny. Not funny, haha, funny weird, but like they weren't on the same page with what they wanted me to do day to day. So I just felt really conflicted of like, Marcus is telling me to do one thing, Rachel is telling me to do another thing that is like opposite, and then it's like Marcus is like, actually no, I didn't say that at all, and it's like, so yeah, that was another thing that I didn't love. Back to the main story. So all of these things in mind, it has nothing on the like 95% of the reason why I left. So I mentioned vaguely that they had like asked me a couple of times if I was Korean, and by a couple I mean like 4 or 5 times, and they said that thing about like, we want this to be really Korean style decoration, and I was like, yeah, that is like a pretty broad spectrum, because like what in your mind is like Korean style decoration. I also forgot to mention something. So my name is Hannah, Hannah. I feel like that's a pretty like normal name. It's also written on my CV. However, like every single time Marcus would like message me, it would always start with "Hi Hina," spelled Heena, and I was like, that must be like autocorrect or something, and it's just like messing up, because clearly he doesn't think my name is actually Hina, because Hannah is written on my CV and also Hannah is written on my WhatsApp. So obviously he doesn't think that that's my name, right? On my first day of work, Marcus was not in the office, so it was just me and Rachel. And so we were talking, whatever. She is honestly very nice. Like, I have only slight gripes with her. I'll get into that in a second. But in general, I can tell that she is like an actually very nice person. And so she was like, oh yes, like we're gonna start working Hina. Oh, am I saying that right? And I was like, actually, my name's Hannah. And then she was like, oh my gosh, it is. Oh, Marcus is so bad with names. I'm so sorry. Like, I'll have to tell him that he got it wrong. And then she was like, I'm gonna go change your name in like our company WhatsApp right now. And so on her like computer, I can see her go into like the desktop WhatsApp, and she goes into my contact, and my contact is saved as Hina Korean. As in, my last name is Korean. Yep. And I was like, oh, right. Okay. Because I was like, okay, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I don't actually like, maybe this is fine. Maybe I'm just feeling uncomfortable for like no reason. From this point forward, I decided to keep a written log of every time they would say something weird to me. During the duration of my time working there, they were preparing for a like beauty exhibition that will take place in October, so like this month, whatever. And so they were saying like, we need you to work the exhibition because we need a Korean face there. And I was like, right, yeah, yeah. And then they were asking me, do you have any Korean friends? And I said, well, yes, I do. And they said, do you think they can work the convention? And I said, well, no, because they live in Korea. And they said, do you have any other like Korean friends that like live in London? And I said, no, unfortunately, I don't. And the thing is, if they wanted people to work at their convention, like work their booth at the convention, I have friends that are qualified that have worked in like the cosmetic and beauty industry, because both of my 2 prior jobs to this job was working in like Korean cosmetics and beauty. So I have qualified friends. They never asked if I had qualified friends. They only cared if I had Korean friends. So I was like, okay, I'm getting the sense that you don't actually care if they or even I am qualified to do any sort of job that you want us to do. You only care if we're Korean. Moving on. That same day, while they were asking if I had any Korean friends that lived in London, I said, no, I don't really have a large group of friends. I mostly just have like my best friend, and then I hang out with her like most of the time. And then Rachel goes, oh, what's she? What's she? So I say, oh, she's half Chinese. And then Rachel goes, "Can I see a picture of her?" And I say, "Okay." So I show like her Instagram to Rachel, and then she goes, "Oh, she's so pretty." And I was like, "Yeah, she's really cute, right?" Like, because my friend is very beautiful. And then Rachel goes, "Yeah, I think she could work. Do you think she could work the convention?" And I was like, "I can ask." I didn't ask. So that felt super weird, funnily enough. And that's when, that was only the second day, because that happened on September 2nd. My first day of work was September 1st. And at that point, I was like, yeah, I need to leave this job as ASAP as possible. On September 3rd, Marcus just made some like vaguely insensitive joke about like how 돼지, like pig, is pronounced, but that's like, I don't know, that's like not necessarily like bad. It just felt a little bit questionable. On September 5th, Rachel was talking about how she wanted me to film like product videos of the products that they sell, because even though they have like videos that the companies in Korea like send them, like info videos, they're all in Korean. So she was like, well, we want them in English, whatever. And she says, and I quote, "People won't understand what they're saying. It sounds like Chinese to them." And then Marcus goes, "That's funny." Is it funny? Because I don't know if it is. I don't know if it is. I don't know if it is. I would also like to point out that, so I'm not going to say their company name because I don't want to get sued. Actually, I don't think they could sue me even if they wanted to, because this is all alleged. The word soul, Seoul, is in their company name. Let's say their company name is Soulicious, like girlicious. Everything she do is like me, from head to her feet like me. No one is going to understand that reference, but that's fine because not everyone is so quirky and cultured like me. Anyway, so they have been pronouncing Soulicious, let's say, as Seoulicious. Seoul. Soul. Seoul. And you know what? I will say, English is not either of their first language, but it's not even an English word. I'm not expecting perfect pronunciation. That's fine. Soul is fine. Like, Seoul, like at least know how to pronounce your own company's name. And maybe they could say it's a stylistic choice, but I don't think they would say it's a stylistic choice. Moving on. So I mentioned how part of my job as a telemarketer essentially was to call people who signed up for the website and say, would you like to have a one-to-one call with one of our expert estheticians, it was just Rachel, she was the only one working there, to learn more about the products and protocols, etc., etc. So those would take place in the office that I was working in as well. And so I would overhear these calls sometimes. And Rachel twice said, Koreans don't dermaplane, even though they literally do. If you go into Olive Young or even like look on Olive Young's website, dermaplane blades are available. That's a really easy fact to look up. So yes, Koreans do dermaplane. So all of this comes to a head on the middle of my third week. I was having a really tough time with these calls because I'm not a very confident person when it comes to talking to people. And you might think, well, you're talking very confidently to the camera right now. Well, yes, I'm alone in my room and I don't have to worry about how people are going to respond, how I need to respond to the people, whatever, especially customers, because again, I don't know what they want me to say. I don't know if they want me to lie. I don't know all the information, whatever. By this point, I was already going to hand in my notice that Friday. So it was Wednesday. So on Wednesday, I was having a really tough time and people kept like being mean to me. And the thing is, I had like a script written and it was approved by both Marcus and Rachel, and they said, yes, this is good, you should say this exact thing every single time. And I was like, okay, great. And so I kept saying the exact script, and then these people that I was calling kept having a bad reaction. I was like, frick, what am I doing wrong? Like, am I saying something bad? Like, I don't understand what I need to do. People kept being mean to me. I'm a very sensitive person, and I'm also a very shy person, and I'm not a very confident person. So all of these things don't make for a very good telemarketer. So after like the third person like was mean to me and hung up, like Rachel was like, what did they say? And I said, oh, they just aren't interested in like the call. And then she was like, oh, like why do you think that is? And I was like, I don't know, like she just sounded like she was like in a hurry because like I was calling during work hours, so it's like safe to assume that a lot of people are working and they don't really want like a marketing call. And then Rachel goes, do you think that's like the case with all people? And then I don't think she necessarily meant it as like, do you think that you're the problem? Maybe have you ever thought that you're the problem? But like I just kind of like was already putting all this pressure on myself, because even though I didn't like the job, I still wanted to do a good job, and I wanted to make sure that they weren't mad at me, and I wanted to make sure that they were happy and I was doing my job how they wanted me to, whatever. So I was like really already putting all this pressure on myself, being like, well, they are not signing up for these like calls because of me, because I'm the worst and I suck and whatever. So when she said that, that just kind of like, that was like the last kind of like thing that like made me snap, and I started like bawling, being like, I don't know what to do, like I just want to like do my job right, like I'm trying to say what you want me to say, but then they react a certain way, and like I don't know how to respond when they react in particular ways. And then I specified also saying like, I just don't feel qualified for this job because I've never done like marketing of any kind, and like I'm not confident when it comes to talking to people on the phone, etc., etc. And you know what, like Rachel was trying to calm me down, because what do you do when there's a hysterical person crying in front of you, right? She was being very nice. She was telling me to calm down, which doesn't really help all the time, but you know, she was being nice, whatever. About 10 minutes later, Marcus comes to the office, because I'm guessing that she like called him and was like, hey, this is a situation, like you should probably come here so we can like discuss things. And while Marcus was on his way, she was saying to me, our social media like platforms aren't set up for you to start working on them now, so if you want, we can end this contract and bring you back on when the social media is ready, but it won't be for another 1.5 months, 2 months or so. And then in my head I'm thinking, oh my god, that's great, because I was gonna quit anyway, and then like I just don't have to do that anymore, so it's perfect. I didn't say that, but I was thinking, I was like, yeah, okay, I think that could be nice. So then when Marcus comes, like essentially I give an abridged version of like how I'm feeling, whatever, because I don't really like him and I don't like being vulnerable with men. I was gonna say that I don't like being vulnerable with men in general, but and then I'm gonna get a comment, be like, why would you say that? You're a bitch or whatever. So we're explaining to Marcus like the deal, and then Marcus was like, yeah, that's fine, whatever. And then I was like, thank you guys for like being so like understanding, like I really appreciate it, you know, like I'm sorry, like I couldn't do a better job, I'm just like a really shy person, like I'm not good when it comes to like trying to sell people things, like I'm not very confident, I'm really sensitive, whatever. I'm not trying to make excuses, more so just like a explanation as to why I'm not super good at talking to people on the phone. And so Marcus goes, yeah, we know that you're shy, maybe because you're Korean, they tend to be more shy. It's a good thing, though. We like it. So I think to myself, surely this man is not trying to place upon me and perpetuate the stereotype that East Asian people, specifically women, are inherently shy, as if it's a genetic trait. Inherently shy, demure, submissive. And so I'm thinking, well, this man has been to Korea a couple of times. He's at least very surface level experienced how Korean general society kind of operates. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. So I say, I was raised in Canada. And he goes, yes, but you're Korean, so maybe that's just like why you're shy. Oh my god, what does that even mean? And you know what? I didn't even realize like how crazy of a thing this is to say until I was telling this story to my sister, who is also half Korean, duh, because she's my sister. And she was like, what the fuck? And I was like, you know what? Yeah, what the fuck? And then I was telling my best friend, who is half Chinese, this, and she was like, that's such a weird thing to say. And I said, you are so right, best friend. That is such a weird thing to say. So, moral of the story, I'm not going back to that company. I don't feel like they're gonna reach out for some reason to have me work with them again in like 1.5 or 2 months. But if they do, I'm not gonna go back. In fact, I'm going to read you the letter of resignation that I was going to hand in. I didn't end up needing to hand it in because, you know, they terminated my contract, whatever. But I'm going to read it to you. So, thank you for giving me this opportunity, blah, 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 blah. I apologize that this is like a difficult time, whatever. I have come to feel like I am not the right fit for this position, so it would be best that you find someone better suited. Finally, during my brief time here, and even before my official start of work date, I have grown increasingly more uncomfortable with certain comments being made about my ethnicity and background that has left me feeling tokenized and dehumanized. While I appreciate and advocate for diversity in workplaces, these incidents have made it seem like you value my Koreanness over the skills and abilities I have to offer. I say this not to point blame, but with the hopes that you will hear what I have to say and reflect. That way, the next employee who happens to be Korean works for you, they'll feel comfortable and valued for what they have to offer the company and not as a token of authenticity. Because essentially, it really just felt like they were trying to be like, look, a real Korean. We have a real Korean on our team, guys. We're authentic. You can trust us because we have a real life Korean. Like, and I don't want to say I'm only half Korean, because like that like saying of you're only half has like been thrown at me my entire life, but like I'm not the most Korean person out there because I was raised in Canada and I am also half Czech and I'm raised Canadian, right? I have like Korean values with family and stuff because that's how my father raised us, but like in general, societally, I am very Canadian. So like, and if you've been watching me for any long amount of time at all, then you may notice that it's only been like very recent that I started talking about the fact that I am Korean. And the reason for that is for a long time, I really like tried to pretend that I wasn't Korean. I really like just separated myself from all facets of my Korean side for like a myriad of reasons. I'm not going to get into that right now, but one of those reasons was I know how weird people are towards East Asian people, like specifically Japanese, and it wasn't like as bad as it is now, but like at the time to Koreans as well, it was kind of on the rise. So I was like, I'm just gonna pretend I'm not, because I'm just gonna save myself that trouble. And you know, I feel a lot of guilt for perpetuating that internalized racism to myself, of course, but I've been trying to rectify that in my 20s because I'm like, well, I don't want to, you know, reject this like whole part of my identity, whole half of my family. But it's interactions like these that make me really remember why I pretended I wasn't Korean in the first place. And it kind of, I'm not going to, but it kind of makes me want to just pretend again, just for a little bit, just so I don't have to feel like that. But I'm not going to do that. If you have any sort of opinion that, oh, what they said was not that bad, what they said wasn't racism, fetishization is racism too. Just saying. Anyway, maybe you found this entertaining. I honestly really hope you did, because then that would make all of this pain and anguish and just bizarreness like a little bit more digestible for me. Because you know what? It is funny. It is genuinely, like, objectively a really funny story. It's also really bad. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed.